Hey.
Now, can you guys tell it's been a while?
Happy Monday, everybody. It's another Monday. It's another mindful Monday, another motivational Monday, another let's get her done Monday.
Mama Monday.
And of course, another Monday Rundown. So we're really excited that you're with us today. If this is the first time that you have been with us on Say That channel, welcome. We're so happy that you're here with us. Typically, on Mondays, we talk about all the things that are going on in the world, culturally, socially, politically, sometimes even financially and business-wise, mindset-wise, that Winston and I a lot of times talk about behind the scenes and off camera. Bring onto the scene on camera so we can get you guys involved in that conversation. So today is another one of those days we're going to have a really interesting conversation about it with a very interesting topic.
Absolutely. So just, guys, let's jump into it. Today's topic is
our need for sex different from basic survival instincts? Is it? Could it be possible?
Jump in the chat immediately.
Right. What are your thoughts? I see people furiously typing or on their phones, right? Furiously with their thumbs. I will give a stab at this. And I do recognize that sex and the drive for sex is definitely based on, I don't know if it's survival. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it is a survival thing because it's about like, how do we procreate? How do we continue the species? So from a hormonal level, from a cellular level, yes. For example, the woman's cycle. When she's ovulating, right? So the best time for her to get pregnant is when she's ovulating. So the best time to procreate the species is when she's ovulating. Guess what happens during ovulation? She has like all of her hormones in highest peak, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. The largest amounts of testosterone are pumping through her at that time, which guess what? Increased sex drive, makes her have an orgasm, all of those things. And so it just happens to be at the time when like it's the best time to procreate. So there's a little bit of a survival instinct there. However, we all know that we can have sex outside of ovulation as well. So it doesn't have to be during that time. But I do think the body is built to create a way in which it's the most pleasurable, the most enjoyable, the most desired or driven is during that period of time.
How does that play out? And for a man, though?
Men produce like spurts of testosterone every 15 minutes or so. So it's basically just this constant drive. So technically, if they're trying to like spread the seed and, you know, create more humans, then they're just at the ready at any moment in time. So I think the answer then is different for men and women.
I was about to say, so the answer in some sense is based on the gender that's being asked the question.
Yeah.
So from the male perspective, it's interesting. I would say yes. I definitely think the need for it is very different than our basic survival instinct. Like for the example of eating, you can go, you know, days without eating. Obviously, you need liquid, but you can go days without eating. You can obviously go days physically without having to have sex. But I think we'll tell ourselves, like if you go. A perfect example of this is blue balls is not a real thing. But I remember growing up, it was something that I heard all the time, that dudes are out there really suffering from that. And all it was in some sense just somebody who, it was just made up, you know, someone decided, oh, I have this feeling emotionally when I don't receive sex. So they started to manifest it into some physical thing. I mean, it's fascinating to think of what we can do with our minds.
That is so fascinating.
But now when you bring up the need now, Janelle, in terms of like the human continuing to exist, then, you know, obviously there is going to be the desire to do that. But do you need to?
I think the other interesting thing too is that like in relationships, like when you're in a relationship, I think many women don't understand the need for men to have sex.
Yeah, exactly. The expectation of that.
Yeah. So because women don't necessarily like, I just wanted to be clear, like it's a need for men. For women, it comes across feeling much more like a want. Like I would want to have sex, but it doesn't feel like a need. Whereas for women, we need to have conversation and communication and maybe intimacy. That's like a need for, like, what do you mean? Like you would feel like you would, your relationship would
The
feel
lack of something.
dying, right?
Yeah.
If you didn't have it, like you need that. And so I would say I've come within the past 3 years of my life, I've recognized that that need that women feel is the same way that men feel about sex within their relationship. It's that kind of need. Like a relationship without sex feels like a relationship that's dying. So it's like,
yeah.
It is the same. Anyway, so I know this, like, I feel like the answer to this question is very different based on how much testosterone you produce in your body.
It's being pumped through your body, into your body. All right. Well, it's not just us. So let's hear what the people from Big Think have to say on the subject.
Yes, let's get to it.
Go.
Nobody ever died because they couldn't get laid. Frank Beach, who was an ethologist in the middle of the 20th century, went to a conference in 1956 and said, "No one has ever suffered tissue damage for lack of sex. If you want to prove to me that sex is a drive, show me the tissue damage that an organism experiences because they do not have orgasms." For the first half of the 20th century, scientists more or less treated sex as a drive. Drive is a very specific kind of motivational system where an organism experiences an uncomfortable internal experience that pushes them out into the world to go solve a problem. So thirst is a drive. Hunger is a drive. Sleep even is a drive. You can literally die of sleep deprivation. Sex, it turns out, is not one of those. Instead, it is an incentive motivation system where instead of being pushed into the world by an uncomfortable internal experience, you are pulled into the world by an attractive something or other out into the, ooh, what's that? We can go ahead and say sex drive. I understand that that is much easier to say than sexual incentive motivation system. It is just as innate and just as natural as a drive system, but it's just not an uncomfortable internal experience that pushes you to go solve a problem or else you could die. If I'm teaching like a group of students, someone will be like, excuse me, ma'am, miss, Emily, I'm pretty sure I have experienced an uncomfortable internal experience when I could not get the sex I wanted. And that is correct, you have. The sensation you're experiencing is frustration. There is a little monitor in your brain that has goals and keeps track of how much effort you're putting into it and how much progress you're making, gets really frustrated that there is something you would like a lot. It's not a basic biological need, which means you are not entitled to it. No one has any obligation to make sure you have enough of it. Wow. It is the oldest, most established piece of science in all of Come As You Are, and yet it's the only idea that has ever caused anyone on Twitter to call me a stupid.
Oh, wow.
People have feelings about this because they feel like I'm taking something away from them. When in fact, I am giving them the freedom to be able to experience sexual desire and know that nothing bad is going to happen. Nobody ever died because they couldn't get laid. The closest thing to a scientific argument for the idea that it might be a drive is, okay, if it's not about individual survival, it is about genetic survival. What about a drive to move my genes into the next generation? That is not how biological psychologists define the term drive. The way we get motivated to have sex is that something sexually relevant happens in our environment, and our brain notices that and is like, turn on signal. And you notice a sensation in your body, maybe in response to that turn on signal. And that sensation is itself a turn on signal. And that goes up to your brain and you get even more turn on signal. And it, what's that? I want to move toward that. In the right context, you're like, I would like to explore further this sensation. It's motivating because it feels good in the right context. Why do we have sex? Because it feels good. So while it is true that no one has ever died because they couldn't get laid, because we cling to this myth that sex is a biological need to which people are entitled, it is the case that people have died. A surprisingly large proportion of the mass murders that happen are committed by people who declare that their motivation is that they are not getting access to the sex that they want and need. If we just understand that sex is a pleasure-based motivation, not a life and safety-based motivation, we can free ourselves into the joy and ecstasy that's available to our bodies when we're not feeling frustrated and angry about a sense of failure to get something that we feel like we're supposed to be able to get. If it's not about getting, but about connecting and feeling the sense of freedom that comes with letting go of the shoulds. And we don't get those things through a false belief that something we just really want is something we are entitled to and require for our safety. The new and radical idea is pleasure is what matters, connection is what matters, authentic humanity is what matters.
Get smarter, faster with videos from the world's biggest think.
Well said. Wow. That did not go where I thought it was going to go.
I don't know why I'm feeling so emotional right now, especially with what you said at the end. Like, connection matters, humanity matters. Maybe it's because of all the incel stuff that got tossed in, like, in the mix of all that.
You started with the Twitter stuff. It's weird. I've watched this woman speak on Netflix. She's done. We've seen her on this show before. It felt very real. Like I was like, she wasn't just doing the teaching thing she normally does. This one was very. She connected. I connected to her. Maybe she's been trying to connect and I just wasn't doing it before. But maybe that part, to your point, when she mentioned what somebody called her on Twitter, just brought me in. And then the way she ended it was not what I was expecting. I also didn't know that statistic about mass shootings, that was what was going on there.
Oh yeah, I recently learned. Shout out to Brandon and Ramon, if you guys remember them from Positivity Pays. They were the first two to educate me about a group that calls themselves the incels. I was unaware of this group's existence and the anger with which they have towards women, and so I get your like, what's happening, like what's going on, because I also just recently learned about that group. And the anger that they hold. I think there's a lot of studies and there's a lot of questioning about exactly what causes it and where it stems from and et cetera. But what we can speak to is what is observed, right? And to your point about that statistic, like that's wild. I mean, the people feeling like it's a
something, a right that they're being denied.
Yeah, a right being denied.
It's almost an entitlement. And there is a, I mean, because this could probably go so far deep because we're being marketed certain things. My son, I have a 6-year-old and he talks about relationships. To me, it's almost like there's obviously an expectation he has to be with someone, you know what I mean, at some point, and it's not a given that has to be the case, which is weird to say. Wow.
Man, I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say. Please, please, please put your comments.
Yeah, please. This one.
We will check them. We will go back. I would love to have a really open conversation about this. Men and women get engaged and talk about this. Like, to bring it back to what she said at the end, if it's not a drive in the fact that like you won't die without it, if it's something that comes from connection and humanity and wanting to pleasure the other person, I think that would make for a much better conversation about it.
That's a good pickup line. Yeah, that'd be a better pickup line.
Yes. Yeah.
You go up to somebody in a bar and be like, yo, how can I make your night better?
There you go. Right.
You may get told you need to leave. You're like, all right, whatever you say. But
that's it, right? Like,
that might be a better pickup line.
You have to accept whatever the answer is. But yeah, I think she summed it up really well.
I agree. That was good.
That was really good. Well, everyone, thank you for spending your Monday with us, or whatever day you end up watching this. We're glad that you were here. And as always, remember, you deserve the good life. Say that.
Yeah, we'll see you guys later. Peace.